In November, President Trump declared a public health emergency to deal with the opioid epidemic. More than 140 Americans die every day from an opioid overdose, according to the Centers for Disease Control. On average, 2 people die of a drug overdose every day in Connecticut, according to trendct.org. The site also says that more people die in Connecticut from overdoses than in car accidents or by gunshot. What has been the impact of this growing crisis on families right here in Simsbury? Julian N. Hartt, Jr., MSW, LCSW, is with us today to discuss this. Julian is the clinical director and co-founder of The Next Right Thing, a West Hartford-based clinical practice that specializes in community-based substance abuse and mental health treatment for adolescents and their families. Julian has more than 40 years of clinical experience working with adolescents with substance abuse and psychiatric problems. He has consulted with a variety of public and private schools and universities, including Simsbury High School, Choate Rosemary Hall, Wyndham High School's Health Center, and Quinnipiac University. Welcome, Julian.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's difficult to believe that this has an impact on a community like Simsbury. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I know that families have lost children in Simsbury, that there's been several deaths over the last couple of years in Simsbury, not unlike other communities in the surrounding area.
As a result of the opioid epidemic?
As a result of the opiate use.
Wow.
And the impact is huge, particularly on the families, on parents, brothers and sisters. They didn't see it coming. It's not my child. So it's going from, and then shame sets in. What did I do that my son was using, or a daughter? It's equal distribution between men and women. So it's shock, shame, I did something wrong. After all, I did everything for my child, didn't I?
When you talk about this crisis, you talk about heroin use in the suburbs. Talk about that.
Well, I'm glad you said that. It started with pills. And no one starts with heroin. They start with painkillers, in particular Oxycontin or Percocets. But the price went up, and as the price went up, heroin became more available. The price for heroin actually went down. So it was simple accessibility, cost accessibility.
When you say pills, are these pills that children are finding, or are these pills that are prescribed to them?
Well, the pills were initially prescribed to their parents or grandparents. They were easily found in families' medicine cabinets, so there was no lack of pills. It was the overprescription of painkillers that the government is trying to pull back on now, but it's too late.
So you start with essentially a legally prescribed drug.
Correct. Safe.
Safe. You're using that in quotes.
Right. If they're prescribed, they must be safe, and they won't be harmful, they won't kill me. But as the supply dried up, and I ran out of money, when the supply at home ran out, I had to go to the streets. And they're pretty expensive, so heroin became the next right thing.
So when are they starting? You're in your practice. Who are you seeing?
Well, they don't start with heroin, nor do they start with opiates. This is a generation that's done a variety of pills, and they've been engaged in high-risk behavior for some time.
High-risk behavior?
Using different substances that had potentially lethal effects. Binge drinking, Xanax, which is also found in the family medicine cabinet. So this is a generation that hasn't been what we call risk aversive. In fact, they pursue risk. Risk becomes the high. So if you hear of somebody who's got fentanyl, instead of running away from it because it's lethal, they'll go to it. So that's an earmark of this generation we've never seen before.
there's a role that parents have in this. If we jump in too early, we're called helicopter parents. What's the parents' role here?
That's a tough one to. Parents, this isn't the first presentation I've done, and they asked me, "What are the signs?" And I said, "You won't see them," which is staggering. Unlike some drugs, you just don't see it coming. And what you may see is that the kids are lying when they shouldn't be lying, and you wonder what's going on with he just lied what he had for lunch. Well, I knew what he had for lunch. So you see
indiscriminate lying?
Indiscriminate lying. So what's behind what are they really not telling us? And you'll also see that they're going through all their money. And I advise parents, check your ATM cards. And that's often how kids finally get caught. Kids don't self-refer to my program. I've never had an adolescent, 17, 18, 19, 20, pick up the phone and say I have a heroin problem.
Right.
Or I have a pill problem.
Right.
It's their parents. Or if they want to follow the legal system, it's the legal system. So parents are vigilant, but they're not going to catch this one.
Many of us in the 60s use marijuana. And so when we find out our kids are using marijuana, it's like, well, it's just marijuana. Why is that an issue?
Well, this isn't the marijuana that we smoked. I don't know about you.
Yes.
But this isn't the marijuana we smoked. It's many more times potent, powerful. So I use the equivalent of a glass of 5 ounces of wine to 5 ounces of grain alcohol.
That's the difference.
That's roughly the difference. So this is very potent alcohol, and parents may not even smell it. It comes in oils or what's called wax or dabs, and it's used in a little pen. It's called vaping. It's very high concentration of THC, the active ingredient in marijuana. So we've seen kids come home from college because anxiety-induced marijuana, depression-induced marijuana use, and even 2 or 3 times in the last couple of years, psychosis. So this isn't the marijuana. It's changed.
When you get a call from a parent, what have they done? I mean, I think I'm hearing that the traditional approach to he's just experimenting, he's young, is not the right one.
Well, I don't get an adolescent into the program that hasn't been in therapy before or hasn't been in treatment before. The parents are trying, they don't stick with it, and they don't get down to roots and causes of the problem. And the misperception that this generation was already at risk before it found opiates, and they were binge drinking. And they were binge drinking at home. College has gotten a bad rap. My 6 years at Quinnipiac, the kids were coming to college already binge drinking, already doing drugs. And the schools got a bad rap for that. I know Quinnipiac did. I knew Quinnipiac did the best they could, very successful in addressing this issue. So in some ways, this was a generation that isn't a generation that's prepared for college.
Why have past therapies failed? Because the way you approach things is different. Why haven't they worked in the past?
First thing that comes to mind is there's a pill for everything generation.
Oh, okay.
So we get adolescents referred to our program. Andrea, we've taken more kids off of medication than we've put on.
Isn't medication part of the rehabilitation program?
The right medication. But if kids are using marijuana, the medication's wrong. But typically physicians don't test for what kids are doing. Or if they test, the kids sign a HIPAA form that says, you can't talk to my parents.
Ah.
And we don't do that. If I drug test all the kids in the program, and if they're using drugs, parents find out. So this has been, I think the opiate epidemic came around in part because the mental health system is pretty badly broken. fragmented. So you may be in a hospital for an overdose, but what happens after that?
Okay.
So there's not what we call a continuity of care. So some of the kids that have died in be it West Hartford or Avon or Simsbury had treatment, but there wasn't aftercare treatment in place. And while we're talking about medication, there is a blocker. It's called naltrexone. Mm-hmm. And it blocks the absorption of any opiate, be it pill or powder. And I insist that you go on. Otherwise, I don't want you in my program. Your chances of success are nil. So you'll want to commit to being clean, commit to taking naltrexone, and after a brief period of time, we move to an injection called Vivitrol, and those kids are remarkably successful. They can put aside very, very powerful cravings. You have to understand that heroin introduces a craving that no one's felt before. It's a compulsion to use. Everything else becomes irrelevant, and when I try to stop, after a very short period of time of use, I can't. I get physically sick. So mom and dad may recognize he has the flu a lot. Withdrawal symptoms from heroin look just like the flu.
Really?
So they're coming home from college because they're not feeling well. It looks just like the flu. They have the shakes, there's sweating, there's diarrhea, but there's no temperature. And that's how you tell the difference.
What's the role in the family in the recovery process?
In our program, the next right thing, they have to be fully engaged.
The family does?
Right.
Okay.
Sort of family reunification.
Huh.
Because there's been such lying. I'll go back to that again. There's been such rampant dishonesty that trust has to be reestablished.
So the parents are not even trusting their own children?
No. Well, they're not trusting themselves. And it often ends up with mom and dad arguing, how come you didn't see this? Ah. So
that becomes a family dynamic issue.
It upsets the whole family dynamic issue. And the child's well-being then establishes the emotional life of the family. If their son's okay, then we're okay. But the family goes on an emotional roller coaster until they're sure their son or daughter is safe. So our parent support group is parents helping parents.
So you have a group not only for the kids, but the parents?
I have two groups for kids, so they can learn to talk to themselves without using a cell phone. Their social and emotional development is stunted, and the parents have to meet with other parents. The parent support groups are really the cornerstone of what we do. And some of the families get together after they leave my program, just because they've made friends that they can be honest about.
Wow.
Because these are families from the surrounding towns that don't want to say, I have a heroin problem in my family. So shame and denial keep people from getting help. And I've seen some remarkably courageous families from Simsbury put their son's picture or daughter's picture in the Hartford Courant. This is what a heroin addict looked like.
Wow.
Really? It's your kid. It's my kid.
You mentioned earlier some of the signs that a child might be struggling with drugs. Talk a little bit more about that.
Well, I have kids, there was no signs. They were doing reasonably well in school. Ah. They were getting by. Maybe their grades could have been a little better, but parents tend to blame schools, externals. You mentioned helicopters. Well, I don't like that term because it's pejorative. I think parents have... But I saw something happen at Quinnipiac. A young woman, it was 1999, came out of a class and she called her mom, I got a bad grade. Instead of talking to a dorm friend, an RA, she called mom. And the cell phone became an umbilicus.
Okay.
If she couldn't cope with, and that's when mom started calling the vice president, who we worked with in the counseling department. Said, my daughter got a B, she should get an A. Instead of saying, daughter, work harder. Mother tries to solve the problem.
So the cycle of using the phone, staying in touch, sort of leaning more on the parents.
And not on themselves, not on their peers. Now, I saw that girl later in the counseling center. I knew who she was. And I said, how come you call your mom when you're having a hard time? Because moms fix everything. But you're 20 years old. So that's where they don't grow up. And that's how we got this new generation called emerging adulthood. We're extending childhood, adolescence to 30. So it's the 10 years of emerging adulthood, and those are the kids that are dying the fastest.
What is the role of the school? You brought up Quinnipiac. Let's talk about Simsbury High School. Some of the earlier schools in Simsbury. What should the schools be doing?
My experience in Simsbury, really positive. I think they knew the kids who were in trouble. They knew the kids well enough, and there was enough conversation between the teachers to bring the kids in, get them help, but it was a follow-up.
Okay.
So, and some of those kids, again, it's confidentiality. At Quinnipiac, we probably violated some confidentiality. This was 2002, 2003. We had a safety meeting. We wanted to know who was safe and anybody. So it was the faculty, it was deans, it was public safety, it was the counseling department.
All of these functions were mobilized against this issue?
Against this, and also rampant suicide was happening at the same time. So you had two things occurring, and it was no coincidence, I think. You had the increase of lethal drug use and also kids taking their own lives because they just couldn't meet somebody's expectations. The cluster suicides at MIT, Cornell, NYU. They just weren't making somebody's expectations. And the kids looked the same.
The kids looked the same. So we talked a little bit about how they started. I've heard the term gateway drug. What is that? And how does that lead ultimately to a dependency?
In 2006, the American Psychiatric Association said there's no such thing as a gateway drug. You can get on any stone at any time. So that's an old worldview. That the first gateway drug was nicotine. You stole a cigarette, or you.
Right.
So first it was a purloined cigarette.
Okay.
And then it was a beer from so there was cigarettes to alcohol.
So we thought we knew the progression.
You thought you knew a progression, and the progression assumed that the first ones coming out of the gate were safe. Alcohol, marijuana. So there was a misperception that the later ones, after you're through the gate, the later ones are the hard drugs. They're unsafe. I'll make the case that alcohol. Kids don't sip a beer, they binge drink.
Right.
And this marijuana is, again, and how do you know it's a different marijuana? The kids take what called tolerance breaks. They
take what?
I'm sorry, it's called tolerance breaks.
Tolerance breaks.
Yeah, because they're not getting high anymore. So they have to stop in order to catch the high that they're looking for. But these are the same kids who would try pills because they were available. They're not risk aversive. And the first adolescent I saw is 2000, I remember him well. It was 2006, his name was Sean. And he was a captain of the hockey team. He was a good student.
So what we call a performance student?
He was a rock star. And he was taking a huge amount of Oxycontin. And I said, oh my goodness, because I know what's next. It was going to be heroin. So he started Oxycontin because his mother was fastidious about smelling his breath and hands when he came home. She was going to catch him if he was smoking marijuana or drinking. So he went to pills right away. It's because mother couldn't smell pills. And then he was at a lethal amount of Oxycontin when he came. Now, I had Sean bring his friends in. I was working out of New Haven, so these were the affluent suburbs of New Haven. And I bring your friends, and I don't know who you are, because of mental health we had never seen.
You say bring your friends in. What were you looking for? Why did you do that?
Why are you guys doing this? I didn't charge for the group. I said, tell me who you are.
You were literally trying to find out what was going on.
No one's seen this. And it happened overnight.
This is what year?
This was 2004.
Wow.
2005. So I said, you're going to have to help me understand who you are, because I know street heroin use, you guys are you have a letter on your chest because of soccer and football.
Right.
You're going to great
You don't look
schools.
like a heroin addict.
No. And I knew what was next. It was sort of the inevitability of heroin. And so,
Even that early, in the 2000s.
If this is good, they're going to go for something else.
I see.
Once something's on the table, it's never taken off. Of illicit drug use, so kids are still getting high on LSD, marijuana, cocaine is making a comeback, methamphetamines is making a comeback. So there's sort of cycles of use and abuse. And again, the pharmaceutical company loaded the community up with pills.
Someone once said to me that people think that people hate their addictions. In fact, they love their addictions.
Well, that's a love-hate relationship. I chase what I loved. I don't get it anymore. I anticipate a high that recedes as fast as I chase it. And that's the nature of all drug use. It feels good up front. Or I alter my feeling states. I don't tell the kids you want to get high. I say you just want to change how you're feeling today. And you will pick a drug that will give you the particular feeling state you're looking for. Is it an upper? Is it a downer? But heroin, and what terrified me, opiates, it offers a feeling of euphoria you're not supposed to feel. It's freedom from all care and worry. So there isn't any other drug that's as addicting as that. And once they're in it for, for good.
And as you're using the drug, does that become less and less effective? Does the high change? Do
you chase
the longer you use it? You chase it? Is that what you said?
Right. You chase the high, but you don't catch it. In fact, you become careless about what you're using because there's a compulsive aspect to this. And that's mostly when kids slip up. That's when they're spending exorbitant amounts of money. Then you may find something strange around the house. You don't know what it is. Now, heroin comes in a bundle. It's called a bundle. It's 1 gram of heroin.
Okay.
Now, it's wrapped with a rubber band, and there's little envelopes, just a little bigger than a stamp. And each one of those little envelopes holds 1/10 of a gram of heroin. So it's a fairly small amount. In Connecticut, it's brownish in color. I'm saying this in case Mom runs across
Yes.
a little envelope. She just can't understand what it is.
Right.
Did it come from the kitchen?
Yeah, did it come from the kitchen?
It's a little cellophane envelope, and it has brown powder in it.
I want to end with something positive.
Sure.
Is there a life after addiction?
If you stick with it.
Are you ever not an addict?
No. Once an addict, always an addict. You've changed your brain functioning. But there is life if you, again, anybody that we work and detox, you don't have to go away to be detoxed. There's this association between, if you're an addict, you have to go away.
Yes, that's what I thought.
If you're an addict, especially if you're a heroin addict, it's like you're a leper. You got to get out of town, and they will fix you.
And so that's not how the Next Right Thing deals with things?
No, we keep kids for a long period of time.
But at home?
Yes, with the family, hopefully taking classes, getting a job, getting their life, and get out of emerging adulthood. Be an adult. Accept responsibility for your life, because your mom can't do this for you.
So sending Johnny away for 30 days of rehab is not the way that you at the Next Right Thing deal with things.
That's correct. And rehabs know this. The relapse rates are 80-90%.
Wow.
But kids, if they relapse on heroin, you're going to die. I mean, it's inevitability. Or respiratory failure. So Narcan's readily available in the community, which is used to stop immediately the absorption. CVS is doing great community service by making Narcan available without a prescription.
So what we can leave people with is that there is life after an addiction.
Yes, having an honest conversation with your child. You're lying. about all sorts of things. Can you tell me what's really going on? And I'm not going to judge you. I just want to help you.
And you have seen kids go on after difficult addictions to live the life they were intended to?
Yes. I Skype with some kids. I have kids that are 2 or 3 years clean and sober, but stayed on the blocking agent. And the boy I referred to earlier, he stayed on it for maybe 6 years. We went to his wedding. He's 10 years clean.
Wow. You've got those stories.
Not all of his friends made it.
Mm-hmm.
But I learned from that family. They reparented their child. They gave him a curfew. They watched his money. They drug tested him. Yeah,
and now he's married, and
he's married. They have a child coming. He's an engineer at a major manufacturing.
Wow, that's a wonderful way to end. Julian, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You've been hearing from Julian Hartt about the ability to live through the opioid crisis and its effect on people in Simsbury and other suburbs. Thank you for joining us.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.